My name is Ethan. I'm 28 years old, and for the last 7 years, I've been the financial backbone of my family. Last week, my parents bought my younger sister Chloe a brand new top-of-the-line Tesla. That very same day, they informed me they were selling my beat-up sedan to help cover her insurance premiums, and that I'd have to start taking the bus to my job downtown. They laughed it off, calling me the practical son. What they didn't know was that my practical job had just made me a multi-millionaire, and I was about to make the most practical business decision of my life, buying them and their golden child out of my life completely. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. And before I get into how this all unraveled, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss the moment their world turned upside down. Before the gleaming white Tesla rolled into our driveway, my life was a carefully constructed routine of sacrifice. It wasn't a role I auditioned for. It was one that was assigned to me the day my father's construction business went under when I was 21. I was in my third year at MIT on a full scholarship for computer science, dreaming of building my own software company. Then came the call. My mother's voice, thin and panicked, telling me they were losing the house. My father, a man I'd always seen as a giant, was broken. And my sister Chloe, then just 18, was in hysterics about having to cancel her upcoming high school graduation trip. So I did what the practical son does. I dropped out of MIT, forfeiting my scholarship and my dreams, and took the first high-paying coding job I could find at a soul-crushing corporate firm. For 7 years, I funneled over 60% of my salary directly into their bank account. I paid the mortgage on the family home, I covered the bills. I made sure my father could keep a skeleton crew for his new, smaller handyman business, a company that barely broke even but salvaged his pride. I was the silent, unseen engine that kept the family afloat. Chloe, on the other hand, was the family's showpiece. She was beautiful, charismatic, and had decided that college was too restrictive for her creative spirit. Instead, she became a lifestyle influencer. My parents saw her not as unemployed, but as an entrepreneur. Her Instagram posts of brunches and boutique shopping trips funded by the money I earned were framed as building her brand. While I was debugging code at 2 a.m., she was posting selfies with captions like "Rise and Grind." The irony was so thick it was suffocating. This pattern of injustice wasn't new. It was the bedrock of our family. I remember 2 years ago, Chloe decided she needed a transformative travel experience to Bali to create content. The price tag was $5,000. I had been saving for a down payment on a small condo, a tiny slice of independence I desperately craved. My mother found my bank statement while cleaning my room. The next evening, she and my father sat me down, their faces etched with practiced concern. "Ethan, honey, my mother started Chloe's career is at a tipping point. This trip could make her. Your condo can wait, can't it? You're so good at saving." It wasn't a question. The next day, $5,000 was transferred from my account to hers. She spent 2 weeks posting photos in bikinis, and my dream of a home was pushed back another 2 years. Then there was the matter of her laptop last year. Her high-end MacBook Pro died, and she needed a new one immediately for her work. I had just received my annual bonus, a modest sum I had planned to use to finally replace my own aging computer, which sounded like a jet engine every time I compiled code. But a single tearful call from Chloe to our parents was all it took. Suddenly, my bonus wasn't for me anymore. "She needs it for her image, Ethan," my father explained, as if it made perfect sense. "You can make do. You always do." So I made do. I worked on my loud, slow machine while she unboxed her brand new top-spec laptop on an Instagram live stream, thanking her amazing parents for being so supportive. I wasn't even mentioned. I was the foundation, the plumbing, the wiring in the walls. Essential but completely invisible. You only notice the plumbing when it breaks. And I never ever broke. I just quietly paid for everything, accepted the scraps of acknowledgement, and told myself that one day they would see. One day they would appreciate the sacrifices I had made. I had thought that day might be coming soon, as I had been working on a personal project, a secret app that I believed had real potential. It was my only remaining ember of the MIT dream. But as I would soon find out, they weren't just unappreciative. They were about to take my sacrifice and grind it into dust under the wheels of a new Tesla. The storm arrived on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. I was working from my small bedroom, which doubled as my office, when I heard a triumphant honk from the driveway. I peered through the blinds to see a sight so surreal I thought I was hallucinating. A brand new Tesla Model Y, shimmering white, was parked right behind my rusty 2008 Honda Civic. My sister Chloe was stepping out of the driver's seat, sunglasses perched on her head like a celebrity, while my parents applauded as if she'd just won an Olympic medal. I walked downstairs in a daze. The air was thick with the smell of new car and smug satisfaction. "Surprise!" Chloe squealed, running to hug me. The hug felt performative, meant for an invisible audience. "Isn't she gorgeous?" My father clapped me on the back, a gesture that was supposed to feel inclusive, but felt more like a dismissal. "We did it, son. We finally got Chloe a vehicle that reflects her brand. This is an investment." An investment. The word echoed in my ears. I looked at the car, which I knew started at around $50,000, and then thought of my bank account perpetually hovering near empty after I'd paid their mortgage the week before. How did you afford this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My mother waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Don't worry about the details, Ethan. We pooled our resources. It's important to support Chloe's career. First impressions are everything in her industry. Pooled our resources." I knew exactly what that meant. It meant they had drained their savings, the small buffer I had painstakingly helped them build over the years, for this. For a car. For an image. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, but I just nodded. I didn't want to be the storm cloud on their sunny day. I didn't want to be the ungrateful, practical son who couldn't understand their grand vision for Chloe. So I congratulated her, forced a smile, and even let her show me the ridiculously large touchscreen on the dashboard. My initial reaction was a familiar cocktail of resignation and a deep, gnawing disappointment. It was the Bali trip all over again, but on a much grander, more permanent scale. I retreated to my room, trying to bury myself in code, but the celebratory laughter from downstairs felt like a constant mockery. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, the other shoe dropped. My father cleared his throat, adopting the serious tone he used whenever he was about to deliver bad news to me. "Ethan, we need to talk about your car." I looked up from my plate. "What about it?" "Well," he began, avoiding my eyes, "with the Tesla, our insurance costs are going up quite a bit. And Chloe will need help with the monthly payments, of course." "We were thinking," my mother chimed in, "that your old Honda, well, you barely use it except for work. And it's not very fuel efficient. We could sell it and put that money toward the Tesla's expenses. It would be a real help to the family." I stared at them, speechless. "You want to sell my car, the car I paid for? How am I supposed to get to work?" Chloe scoffed from across the table. "Oh, Ethan, don't be so dramatic. There's a bus stop like 3 blocks from here. It's better for the environment anyway. I could do a whole post about it. Number sustainable commute." My father nodded eagerly. "Exactly, it's a practical solution. You're the practical son, Ethan. You understand." And there it was again. My practicality wasn't a virtue. It was a cage. It was the excuse they used to justify every sacrifice they demanded of me. I looked at their smiling, expectant faces, and I felt something shift inside me. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowed frustrations, began to bubble to the surface. But I still couldn't bring myself to fight. The habit of compliance was too deeply ingrained. I just pushed my food around my plate and mumbled, okay. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I had no idea that their practical solution was about to push me over an edge I never knew existed. The days that followed were a masterclass in casual cruelty. The first incident was the sale of my car. It happened so fast it felt like a surgical strike. My father listed it online that Wednesday, and by Friday, a kid from the local community college was in our driveway counting out $1,200 in cash. I watched from my window as my father handed over the keys to the only piece of property that was truly mine. He came inside, slapped the cash on the kitchen counter, and announced, "There, that's the first 3 months of Chloe's insurance covered." He didn't offer me a single dollar. When I quietly asked if I could have at least a portion of it to buy a monthly bus pass, my mother looked at me with genuine confusion. "Oh, Ethan, don't be difficult. It's only a few dollars a day. Just use the money you would have spent on gas." The money I wouldn't have because I gave it all to them. So on Monday morning, I started my new routine. I woke up an hour and a half earlier, walked the 3 blocks to the bus stop, and stood waiting. Of course, it was raining that day, a cold, miserable drizzle. The bus was late. By the time I squeezed into a damp seat between a coughing man and a woman with a leaky grocery bag, I was already soaked and stressed. As the bus crawled through downtown traffic, I glanced out the window and saw it. The white Tesla. Chloe was driving, laughing, with a friend in the passenger seat, a fresh green juice in her hand. She drove past my bus without a second glance. I sank lower in my seat, the humiliation burning in my chest. I was literally paying with my freedom and my dignity for the luxury she was so carelessly enjoying. My girlfriend Sarah was the one who first put a name to the insanity. She was a pediatric nurse, a woman with a boundless capacity for empathy and a spine of steel. When I told her what had happened, she was silent for a full minute, her expression shifting from disbelief to pure, unadulterated rage. They did what she finally asked, her voice dangerously calm. I tried to defend them using the same tired excuses I'd always used. "They're just trying to support Chloe's career. They think it's an investment. I'm just trying to keep the peace." Sarah took my hands in hers. "Ethan, this isn't keeping the peace. This is enabling abuse. They are not supporting her. They are sacrificing you. My parents would never, ever do that. Normal, loving parents don't take from one child to give to another. They certainly don't make one child homeless transport-wise to buy the other a luxury car." Hearing her say it so plainly, so logically, was like a splash of cold water. She was my external validator, the voice of reason in the fog of my family's dysfunction. Her parents, a retired teacher and a plumber, had raised 3 kids on a modest income, yet they had treated all of them with fairness and respect. The contrast was jarring. The situation at home continued to deteriorate. Even without my car expenses, my parents' financial demands didn't lessen. In fact, they increased. "Ethan, the electric bill is a bit higher this month," my mother would say, sliding the statement across the table. "I think it's all the computers in your room." Never mind that Chloe had a bank of studio lights for her videos and a new high-end gaming console she'd bought on a whim. I was the problem. My work, the very work that paid for the electricity, was the burden. I tried to talk to them one night. I sat them down and calmly explained how the bus commute was affecting me, how I was getting less sleep, how it was making it harder to focus on my job. I suggested a compromise. Maybe they could help me with a down payment on a cheap used scooter, something to get me to and from work. My father actually laughed. "A scooter? Don't be ridiculous, Ethan. You'd look silly. Just be a team player. Chloe's success is the family success." My sister overheard the conversation from the next room. She sauntered in, scrolling through her phone. "God, Ethan, you're so needy. It's just a bus. People do it every day. Stop trying to make this about you." My brand is finally taking off. And you're trying to ruin the momentum with all your negativity. That was the moment I stopped seeing it as a family dynamic and started seeing it for what it was. An exploitative system with me as the sole resource. Sarah was right. This wasn't love. It was a transaction, and I was the only one paying. I started spending more time at Sarah's apartment, enjoying the simple normalcy of her family, where chores were shared and successes were celebrated equally. The quiet nights at her place were a stark contrast to the tense transactional atmosphere of my own home. It was during one of those quiet nights while working on my secret project that I got the email that would change everything. The subject line simply read, "Acquisition offer." My heart started pounding. This was it. The culmination of years of secret, late-night work. This was my way out. But I had no idea that before I could escape, my family was about to make one final devastating move that would sever our ties forever. The final unforgivable act wasn't about a car or a bus pass. It was about the one thing I had left that I thought was mine, the legacy of my sacrifice. It concerned my father's handyman business, Mark's Home Solutions. For 7 years, it had been my silent cross to bear. It wasn't a business. It was a charity I funded. I had built their website for free, managed their bookkeeping on weekends, and my monthly cash infusions were the only things that kept them from bankruptcy. The business was a monument to my father's pride, but it was built on the foundation of my abandoned dreams. One Sunday evening, my parents called a family business meeting. I assumed it was another veiled request for more money. Sarah had offered to come for support, but I told her I needed to face this alone. I walked into the living room to find my parents and Chloe sitting on the sofa, looking incredibly pleased with themselves. A stack of official-looking documents sat on the coffee table. "Ethan, sit down," my father said, beaming. "We have some incredible news." I sat, a sense of dread coiling in my gut. "As you know," he continued, "I'm not getting any younger, and it's time to think about the future of the company, about its legacy." My mother picked up the narrative, her eyes sparkling. "Chloe has had the most brilliant idea. She wants to take the business to the next level, rebrand it, make it modern, social media savvy. She's going to be the new face of the company." I stared at them, confused. "Chloe, she doesn't know anything about construction or home repair." Chloe let out an airy laugh. "Oh, Ethan, it's not about knowing how to hammer a nail. It's about branding. We're going to relaunch as Chloe's Home Glow Up. I'll do TikTok videos of our projects. We'll get sponsorships. It's going to be huge." The absurdity of it was staggering. But then my father slid a document across the table toward me. "We've had the lawyer draw up the paperwork. We're officially restructuring. I'm making Chloe the new CEO and majority shareholder with 70% of the company." I looked down at the paper, my vision blurring. "And what about me? What's my role in this new vision?" My father clapped his hands together. "This is the great part. You'll stay on doing what you do best. You'll handle all the boring back-end stuff, the finances, the website, the client scheduling. You'll have a 10% stake for all your hard work. 10%. After 7 years of bleeding myself dry to keep that business alive, they were offering me a pittance, a footnote, in my sister's new vanity project. My father would retain 20%, a figurehead role. The company I had single-handedly saved was being handed to the one person who had never contributed a single thing to it. I looked at their faces, searching for any sign that this was a joke. There was none. They genuinely believed this was a fantastic idea. They saw my practical skills as a utility, a given, while they saw Chloe's superficial online presence as the true key to success. That was the moment the years of quiet compliance shattered. The dam of resentment finally broke. I had given up my education. I had given up my home. I had given up my car. I had given up my savings. And now they were trying to take the very last thing. I had the acknowledgement of my 7 years of labor. They weren't just taking from me anymore. They were erasing me from the story of my own sacrifice. I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking, but my voice was eerily calm. "No," I said. The smiles vanished from their faces. "What do you mean, no?" my father asked, his tone hardening. "I mean no. I will not be your back-end support. I will not accept 10% of a company I kept alive. I will not be a part of this." My mother's face crumpled. "Ethan, don't do this. Don't be selfish. This is for the family. I have been nothing but for the family for 7 years," I said, the words finally pouring out. "And in return, you've treated me like an ATM, a chauffeur without a car, and now a glorified intern. You don't see me. You don't see what I've given up. You only see what else you can take." Chloe rolled her eyes. "Here we go. Saint Ethan and his martyr complex. Just sign the papers so we can move on with our lives." That was it. That was the final nail. In that moment, looking at their bewildered and entitled faces, I felt a strange, liberating clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The love I felt for them, buried under years of resentment, had finally suffocated. They thought they had just secured their future by crowning their princess. What they didn't know was that they had just lost their entire kingdom. And my future, a future they couldn't possibly imagine, was about to begin. As I walked out of that living room, leaving them stunned and speechless, I didn't go to my room to pack. I went to my room to plan. They thought I was a low-level corporate coder, a dependable drone with no ambition beyond serving them. They had absolutely no idea who I had become in the shadows of their neglect. My secret weapon wasn't a person or a hidden document. It was an application. For the past 3 years, during the hours after I finished my day job and before I collapsed into bed, I had been building something of my own. It was called Nexus. It was a highly sophisticated, decentralized data management protocol designed for businesses that needed absolute security and efficiency. It was the kind of complex, game-changing software I had dreamed of creating back at MIT. It was my lifeboat, the one thing I did purely for myself. The email I had received a few days prior was from Innovate Corp, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the world. They had discovered Nexus through a small open-source community where I'd shared a sanitized version of the code. They weren't just interested, they were aggressive. After a whirlwind week of frantic secret video calls with their acquisitions team calls, I took from my car in the dead of night to avoid being overheard. They had made an offer. They offered me $15 million for the Nexus protocol and a 3-year consulting contract. $15 million. I had signed the final papers the morning of the disastrous family business meeting. The first wire transfer of $5 million was already sitting in a new private bank account that my family knew nothing about. While they were busy planning how to give my sister a company I had paid for, I had become a multi-millionaire. The delicious, crushing irony was almost too much to bear. My first call wasn't to a real estate agent or a car dealership. It was to a man named Arthur Vance, a ruthless but brilliant corporate lawyer Sarah's father had recommended. I met him the next day at his downtown office, a sleek, minimalist space that screamed power. I laid out the entire 7-year history, the dropped MIT scholarship, the constant financial drain, the car, and finally the hostile takeover of the family business. Arthur listened intently, his face impassive. When I finished, he leaned back in his leather chair. "Mr. Thompson," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "what they have done is morally reprehensible. But what you are about to do is perfectly legal. This isn't revenge. This is a hostile acquisition of your own life. Together, we mapped out the counteroffensive. It would be a two-pronged attack executed with surgical precision. Phase 1 was the business. Arthur's team discovered what I already suspected: my father's business was in even worse shape than I thought. It was leveraged to the hilt with multiple outstanding vendor payments and a small business loan that was on the verge of default. It was essentially worthless without my continued financial support. The 70% stake they had given Chloe wasn't a prize. It was a ticking time bomb. "We won't make an offer to them," Arthur explained. "We'll make an offer to their creditors. We will buy their debt. For pennies on the dollar, most likely. Once we control the debt, we control the company. We can then force a sale to recoup the losses, and the only buyer will be a shell corporation that we set up for you." Phase 2 was the house. The mortgage I had been paying for 7 years. I had the bank statements to prove that nearly every payment had originated from my personal account. While my name wasn't on the deed, we had a strong case for a constructive trust, arguing that I had a financial stake in the property. But Arthur suggested a cleaner, more powerful move. "They are financially vulnerable," he said. "Once we take the business, their only asset is the house. We will make them a cash offer well above market rate to buy it from them outright. An offer so good in their desperate state they won't be able to refuse. You won't be taking their house. They will be selling it to you willingly." The plan was audacious. It was cold. And it was beautiful. It was using the very language of business and practicality they had always used against me, but on a scale they could not comprehend. For the next few days, I let them flounder. I moved my essential belongings to Sarah's apartment, ignored their increasingly frantic calls and texts, and let Arthur and his team work their magic. My father left me a voicemail, his voice laced with anger, telling me I had 24 hours to stop this childish tantrum and come back to sign the papers. Little did he know I was preparing to have him sign papers of his own. The stage was set. The final act of the Ethan Thompson charity show was about to begin, and the finale would be a standing ovation for one. A week after I walked out, I orchestrated the final meeting. I didn't summon them to a lawyer's office. That would have felt too much like their own tactics. I booked a private dining room at a high-end restaurant downtown, a place they had always talked about going for a special occasion but could never afford. I told them via a curt email that I was ready to discuss the terms of my return. They agreed immediately, no doubt, assuming I had come crawling back. I arrived first dressed in a custom-tailored suit Arthur had insisted I buy. When they walked in, they stopped dead in their tracks. They were expecting the beaten-down practical son in a faded t-shirt. They were not prepared for the man sitting at the head of the table, exuding a calm authority they had never seen before. "Ethan, my mother," said her voice, uncertain. "What is all this? Please sit," I said, gesturing to the chairs. "I believe we have some business to discuss." They sat, looking unnerved. Chloe, for once, was silent, nervously tapping her acrylic nails on her phone. My father recovered, first slipping back into his role as patriarch. "Good. You've come to your senses. We were worried, son. Now, about those papers." I held up a hand, silencing him. The move was so uncharacteristic for me that he actually stopped talking. "Before we get to that," I said, "I'd like to review the current state of Mark's Home Solutions." I slid a folder across the table. It was a detailed financial breakdown prepared by Arthur's forensic accountants. It showed the debt, the pending lawsuits from unpaid suppliers, the defaulted loan. It showed in stark black and white that the company was insolvent. My father's face went pale as he read it. This is an exaggeration. We're just having a tough quarter." "You've been having a tough quarter for 7 years, Dad," I said quietly. "The only thing keeping you afloat was the monthly investment from my salary. An investment that has now stopped." "So this is what this is about," Chloe sneered, finding her voice. "You're trying to blackmail us, give you a bigger piece of the company." "Not at all," I said, smiling faintly. "I have no interest in owning a piece of a failing company. However, other people are interested." I slid a second folder across the table. "This is a notice from Trinity Investments, the primary holder of your business debt, which they acquired earlier this week. They are calling in the full amount effective immediately. Since you cannot pay, they are forcing a liquidation sale of all company assets to the highest bidder." Who is Trinity Investments?" my mother stammered. "That would be me," I said. The silence in the room was absolute. It was as if I had sucked all the air out. My father stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, the color draining from his face. Chloe's phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the table. "The highest bid," I continued, my voice steady, "has already been accepted. $1. For the entire company, its assets, and its name. Congratulations, Dad. As of 9 a.m. this morning, I own your business." My mother started to cry softly. "Ethan, why would you do this to us, to your own father?" "You mean the way he did it to me," I countered, my voice hardening. "The way he planned to give his life's work to his daughter who knows nothing about it, while relegating the son who saved it to a glorified assistant." "This isn't personal, Mom. It's a practical business decision." "I believe that was the term you used." My father finally found his voice a choked whisper. "You've destroyed me." "No," I said. "You were already destroyed. I just bought the rubble." I let that sink in for a moment before moving to phase 2. Now onto the second matter, the house. I pushed a third folder toward them. It contained a single document, a cash offer to purchase their home for $1.2 million, nearly double its market value. "With the business gone, you have no income," I stated calmly. "You won't be able to make the next mortgage payment. You will lose this house. I am offering you a way out, a generous one. You can sell it to me, walk away with enough money to live comfortably and start over." Chloe finally exploded. "You can't do this. You can't just buy our lives. Where did you even get this kind of money? Are you dealing drugs?" I leaned back and laughed. It was a real genuine laugh, and the sound of it seemed to shock them more than anything else. "No, Chloe, I didn't have to. While you were busy building your brand, I was building a company. A company I sold last week for $15 million. I watched as the final pieces clicked into place in their minds. The secret late nights, the tired eyes, the refusal to fight back. It hadn't been weakness. It had been focus. They hadn't been neglecting a son. They had been ignoring a titan in their midst. My father just shook his head, looking utterly defeated. My mother was sobbing openly now. But it was Chloe's reaction that was the most telling. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated envy and rage. The golden child had just realized the throne she'd been given was made of cardboard, while the peasant brother she'd scorned was sitting on a mountain of gold. "You have 48 hours to accept the offer on the house," I said, standing up and placing a crisp $100 bill on the table to cover their meals. "Arthur Vance will be in touch. I suggest you get your own lawyer." As I walked out of that room, leaving them with the paperwork and the shattered pieces of their reality, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt light. The immense weight of their expectations, their entitlement, and my own misplaced sense of duty had finally been lifted. My life, for the first time in 7 years, was entirely my own. The 48 hours I gave them came and went. On the final hour of the second day, a call came from a local attorney they had hired. They accepted the offer. There was no fight left in them. The combination of financial ruin and the shocking revelation of my success had completely broken their spirit. The 2 weeks that followed were a blur of logistics. I never went back to the house. I hired a moving company to pack my few belongings from my old room and deliver them to my new place. I had rented a sleek, modern penthouse apartment overlooking the city, the kind of place I used to dream about while staring out of the bus window. It was quiet, spacious, and entirely mine. Sarah helped me unpack. As we stood on the balcony looking out at the city lights, she wrapped her arms around me. "How does it feel?" she asked softly. "Quiet," I said. For the first time in years, my head is quiet. The day the sale of the house closed, I bought myself a car. Not a flashy supercar, but a deep blue Audi R8. It was a nod to the engineer I had once hoped to be, a machine built with precision, power, and elegance. Driving it off the lot, I felt a simple, profound joy. It wasn't about the status. It was about the reclamation. It was the anti-Tesla. News of what had happened trickled back to me through Sarah, who still heard things from mutual acquaintances. My parents and Chloe had moved into a small, two-bedroom rental apartment in a less desirable suburb. The reality of their new life was hitting them hard. Without my income, and now without the house or the business, they were truly on their own for the first time. Chloe's influencer career, which was propped up by the illusion of a wealthy lifestyle, began to crumble almost immediately. Her followers noticed the downgrade in her surroundings. The brand sponsorships dried up. The Tesla, which was leased, was voluntarily repossessed within a month because they couldn't make the payments. I took control of the family business, or what was left of it. I paid off the outstanding debts to the vendors, many of whom were small local suppliers my father had left in the lurch. I gave the two remaining loyal employees generous severance packages and recommendations. Then I dissolved the company. I had no interest in being a handyman. My only goal was to clean up the mess honorably. I even visited the old house once after the closing. It was empty, echoing with memories. I walked through the rooms where I had felt so small, so overlooked. I stood in the driveway where the Tesla had been unveiled, and where my own humble car had been sold off. I felt no anger, just a strange sense of detachment, as if I were visiting a museum of a life that belonged to someone else. I put the house on the market the next day. I didn't need it. I just needed to close that chapter. I started to live. Really live. I reconnected with old friends from my first couple of years at MIT. I started working out. I took Sarah on a spontaneous trip to Italy. For the first time, I was spending the money I earned on my own happiness, not on someone else's survival. It was a strange and wonderful feeling. But I knew the real test wasn't in the escape, but in what came next. The dust had settled, but the real changes, the ones that truly defined who they were and who I had become, would only become clear in the months that followed. 10 months can feel like a lifetime. In the 10 months that followed my grand departure, my world expanded in ways I could have only dreamed of. The penthouse apartment was no longer just a place to live. It was the headquarters of my new life. I had used a portion of the acquisition money to launch my own venture, Nexus Labs, a small incubator focused on mentoring and funding promising young software developers from underprivileged backgrounds. I wanted to give them the chance. I almost lost the chance to build their dreams without having to sacrifice their souls. The work was more fulfilling than anything I had ever done. Sarah and I were stronger than ever. We had moved in together, our lives blending seamlessly. Her steady, compassionate nature was the perfect anchor for my new, fast-paced world. Her family had embraced me as one of their own, and spending holidays with them in a home filled with easy laughter and unconditional support was a healing experience I hadn't known I needed. My old family, however, was on a very different trajectory. The initial shock had given way to a harsh, humbling reality. My father, stripped of his business, and the grand house that defined his sense of self, had fallen into a deep depression. After a few months of silence, he reached out. It wasn't a call asking for money, but a stilted, awkward email. He said he was sorry. He said he had been a fool, blinded by pride and a misguided love for Chloe. He said he was proud of me. It was the first time in my adult life he had ever said those words. I didn't reply right away, but after talking it over with Sarah, I agreed to meet him for coffee. He looked older, smaller. He told me he was in therapy trying to understand how he had failed so profoundly as a father. I didn't offer forgiveness, not yet, but I offered a sliver of hope. I told him I would pay for his therapy sessions to continue. It was a boundary, not a handout. I was investing in his potential for change, not bailing him out of his mistakes. My mother struggled the most. Her identity was tied to being the matriarch of a successful family. With that illusion shattered, she was lost. She made several tearful calls trying to guilt me back into the fold, lamenting how we were no longer a family. I had to be firm. "We are a family, Mom," I told her during one call, "but the old rules are gone. Our relationship, if we're going to have one, has to be built on respect, not obligation." It was a slow, painful process for her, but she started attending therapy with my father. And then there was Chloe. Her fall from grace was the most dramatic. Her influencer career evaporated overnight. Without the backdrop of a beautiful home and a luxury car, her content felt empty. The brands dropped her. The followers moved on. For the first time in her life, she was forced to confront a world that didn't revolve around her. The Tesla was gone. The designer clothes were sold on consignment. She had to get a real job working as a receptionist at a dental office. About 8 months in, she called me. Her voice was different, quiet, hesitant. She didn't ask for money. She asked if I could look at her resume. She wanted to apply for a marketing assistant position and didn't know where to start. It was the most shocking request I had ever received from her. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop, and for the first time we had a real conversation. She admitted her jealousy, her insecurity, her terror of being ordinary. She cried real tears this time, not the performative kind. She apologized for everything. I helped her with her resume. I gave her some interview tips. Like with my father, it was a hand up, not a handout. The dynamic had fundamentally, irrevocably shifted. I was no longer the invisible foundation. I was the architect of my own life. And in doing so, I had forced them to finally start building their own. I was no longer their provider, but I was perhaps on the path to becoming their brother and son again, on terms defined by mutual respect. Looking back now, 10 months later, from the quiet sanctuary of my new life, it's easy for an outsider to frame my story as one of simple revenge. The narrative is almost biblical in its simplicity. The forgotten son, the prodigal son, in reverse returns with immense power and lays waste to the family that scorned him. I'll be honest, in the raw, immediate aftermath of that final confrontation in the restaurant, a part of me did relish that narrative. There was a primal, almost intoxicating satisfaction in watching the arrogant certainty crumble from their faces, in seeing the reflection of my newfound power in their shocked eyes. For a fleeting moment, it felt like justice. It felt like victory. But that feeling, I quickly learned, is like sugar, a quick, intense rush that leaves you feeling empty afterward. True strength, true victory isn't found in the demolition of others. It's found in the construction of oneself. As the weeks turned into months, I came to a profound realization my story wasn't about revenge at all. It was about value and the radical, life-altering act of reclaiming it. For 7 years, I'd outsourced the definition of my own worth. I handed it over to my family to be appraised, and they slapped a bargain basement price tag on it. I was Ethan, the practical son. My value was measured in my utility, the percentage of my salary I could contribute, the number of problems I could silently solve, the sheer volume of my own needs I was willing to swallow. I was a human infrastructure project, essential but unglamorous, meant to support the gleaming monuments they built in my sister's honor. I had allowed myself to believe that this was my purpose, that my sacrifice was a noble, silent form of love. The $15 million didn't fundamentally change who I was as a person. It didn't make me smarter, or kinder, or more deserving of respect. What it did was give me a tool. It was a sledgehammer powerful enough to shatter the distorted mirror they had held up to me for my entire life. The money didn't give me value. It gave me the leverage to finally assert the value that had been there all along. It amplified the voice I had been too afraid to use, allowing me to say, "No more. The price you have put on my life is no longer a price I am willing to pay." Perhaps the most crucial lesson I learned is that you cannot force people to see you, but you can refuse to remain invisible. You can step out of the shadows even when the light is blinding and uncomfortable. My parents and sister didn't see me, not because they were incapable, but because it was convenient for them not to. My invisibility served their narrative. Acknowledging my sacrifices would have forced them to acknowledge their own selfishness, and that was a truth too heavy for them to carry. My grand, decisive action wasn't about punishing them. It was about ending my participation in their delusion. I wasn't just buying their business or their house. I was buying back my own reality. That Thanksgiving was the first real test of this new reality. I hosted it at my penthouse, a decision that felt both terrifying and necessary. When they arrived, the awkwardness was a physical presence in the room. They looked smaller, diminished without the backdrop of the grand family home that had always been their stage. My father, who had been in therapy for a few months, brought a bottle of non-alcoholic cider and looked me in the eye when he handed it to me. "Thank you for having us, son," he said, and the words held a weight of gratitude I had never heard before. Chloe was a ghost of her former self. The flashy clothes were gone, replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. She was quiet, observant. When Sarah and I were plating the food, she came into the kitchen and hesitantly asked, "Is there anything I can do to help?" It was a question so simple, so normal, yet from her it felt like a seismic shift. For her entire life she had been served. Now she was offering to serve. I handed her the salad tongs and simply said, "Thanks, Chloe. You can toss the salad." It was a moment that held more significance than 1,000 screamed apologies. My mother, however, was still struggling to adapt to the new script. As we sat down to eat, she looked around the vast modern dining room and sighed dramatically. "It's a beautiful place, Ethan, but it doesn't feel like a family home, does it? So big and empty just for the two of you." It was a classic move, a subtle attempt to re-inject guilt into the atmosphere. The old me would have shrunk, apologized, or tried to justify my choices. But the new me, with Sarah's hand gently squeezing mine under the table, just smiled. "It's our home, Mom. And right now, it's filled with family. That's what matters." The boundary was gentle, but it was firm. I would not allow her to tarnish this new peace. The biggest revelation I've had is about the nature of boundaries. I used to think of them as walls you build to keep people out. But I was wrong. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors. They are instructions. They teach people where the entrance to your life is and how to enter with respect. By removing my financial support and demanding a new kind of emotional currency, respect, accountability, and genuine effort, I had simply changed the locks. It was now up to them to find the new key. My father and Chloe, it seems, are slowly learning how to use it. My mother is still fumbling with the handle, but at least she hasn't walked away. And in this process, I learned that forgiveness is not a single event. It's not a switch you flip. It's a quiet, ongoing process, and it's something you do for yourself, not for the person who hurt you. It's the act of letting go of the hope that the past could have been any different. I haven't forgotten what they did, but the anger no longer consumes me. It has been replaced by a quiet, clear-eyed understanding. I can see them now not as monsters, but as flawed, insecure people who made terrible choices. And from that distance, I can choose to engage with them in a way that is safe and healthy for me. So I want to ask you, the person watching this right now, what is the invisible labor you perform in your family? Are you the emotional caretaker, the planner, the peacemaker, the one who always puts your needs last? What would happen if you stopped? I invite you to share your stories in the comments below. Reading them reminds us that none of us are alone in these struggles. If this story has touched you, if it has made you think about the value you bring to the world, please do me the honor of giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. And if you know someone who feels unseen, who is trapped in the role of the practical one, share this video with them. It might just be the permission they need to start their own reclamation project. Thank you for being a part of my journey by listening. And please remember this, your value is not a negotiation. It is not something to be decided by a committee of people who benefit from your diminishment. It is a fundamental, unchangeable truth. The most powerful investment you will ever make is the one you make in yourself.